Teachers, what was the best smartass response from a student you have heard? Back when I taught first grade, we were doing a writing assignment about Thanksgiving. The kids had to draw a picture of their family celebrating Thanksgiving, and then write about it. One little girl drew the table and chairs, and that was all. I knew she just didn't feel like doing the work, so I tried to prompt her. I asked where the food and her family were, and she snapped right back with, "Here washing the dishes." Had to give her credit for coming up with a logical argument for not doing the work. Not a teacher, but witnessed as a student. There was literally 30 seconds left of class and my buddy starts to pack up. The teacher didn't seem to mind, but when the bell rang and buddy got up to leave, the teacher said the classic line, "The bell doesn't dismiss you, I do," and buddy just continues to leave, gets in the doorway of the class and says, "If it decides when I come, it decides when I leave," and just leaves the class. My grandson, who lives with my wife, and I was sent to office one day for breaking dress code, no belt. The principal asked why he didn't wear it, to which he replied, "My crackhead mother stole it, and I didn't have time to get another." Principal got super mad and called us to tell us what happened and what he had said. I confirmed his story. Well, his crack addict mother came to visit last night and we didn't realize it was gone until this morning. I could audibly hear him gasp over the phone and immediately started apologizing. And every time I see him now he mentions it and apologizes. I had a teacher tell a classmate no drinks in class. He got up from his seat, picked up the teacher's drink, and deposited in the garbage with his drink. She sent him to the office. I was doing poorly in a middle school class on account of my mother having terminal brain cancer. This one teacher would constantly get on my case, even though he knew about the situation. I wasn't a bad student, I was just severely distracted from the situation at home, and couldn't always focus. I missed 2 days of school due to her worsening condition. The day before she died, he left a voicemail at my house explaining my 5 missing homework assignments, but no one really cared. I didn't go to school for a week after her death, and when I returned I said to him, "Well, now that she's dead I can finally finish those assignments right." I think he finally understood. The principal gave him a good chewing out too. This was while working with 9-year-olds. We're doing number problems and a kid is having trouble with a sum. The sum is you have 40 sweets. You give half your sweets to your friend. How many sweets do you have now? I grab 40 counters and say to the kid, "Here are 40 sweets. If you give me half, how many will you have left?" Kid turns to me and utterly deadpan says, "I can't give you the sweets. You aren't my friend." Tangentially related, smart ass response from teacher on behalf of the student. Had a student that came back a couple of weeks out of class. Counselor let the teachers know that his father had passed and he was having a rough time. I pulled him aside after class one day, told him not to worry about any of the work he missed. Focus on getting caught up in your other classes. It'll make things work out here. I was his 10th grade English teacher. We had already taken the end of year exam. As far as the state was concerned, he was done, and that was good enough for me. Kid was straight, as until his dad passed. Cut to a few weeks later, him called into the counselor's office for a meeting with the student's other teachers. I double check and has been doing great in class, and work I've assigned has been turned in on time, even though I told him he didn't have to, so I have no idea what's going on. Come to find out his other teachers weren't as lenient on the makeup work as I was. He had gotten behind in all his other classes and had stayed behind. Now he was in danger of failing everything but my class. He'd have to repeat the year save for English. Counselor asks me what I did to help the student. Oh, well, I told him not to worry about anything he missed, and that as far as I was concerned he was already caught up, and he could do his best in class going forward. One of the other teachers balked. I don't see why we needed Mr. Hex Dragon's input. He just let the kid skip out on work. That's not helpful. I replied, the kid's dad just freaking died. You really think the last 6 weeks worth of history matters to him in the slightest? The counselor smiled and pointed at me. I invited Mr. Hex Dragon because I knew he would say some things I'm not allowed to say. A fellow student in my class shouted that it was freaking freezing in the classroom. The teacher naturally told him not to use the F word, so the kid replied, "It's freaking cold in here." had my class of working class kids at an art gallery. As we waited for our tour to begin, we played on the small playground near the door. A prep school kid in a uniform approached two of my boys and said, "I bet him smarter than you are." I watched to make sure no blood was drawn. My students can hold their own pretty much anywhere, and they don't accept insults casually. But they were cool. "No, you're not. Are you in grade 2? The boy said he was, and one of my boys said, "So then we're all grade 2. So we are all grade 2 smart." He went back to climbing the monkey bars. But the prep school kid continued, "I know him smarter. Let's do some math and I'll prove it." The toughest kid in my room looked this guy square in the eye and said, "Well, I'm smart enough not to do math when I'm having fun on a playground." My history teacher would spend half the class making jokes directed at the students. One student in particular always took the jokes on the chin and never really made any comebacks. Eventually, the teacher called him out and jokingly lectured him about standing up for himself. He ended his rant with, "You've gotta be a man. You've gotta be like me." The student replied with, "Well, which one? Do you want me to be a man, or do you want me to be like you?" Edit. For those wondering, this happened back when I was in high school in the late 80s. It's one of those moments I will never ever forget. D. In HSR functions and relations, teacher would always start to say something, forget it and say, "I lost my train of thought." Well, one day a buddy of mine replies, "It's okay sir, there were no important passengers on board." Edit. For those who are asking, functions and relations is a subset of finite math. Think of an entire course on the quadratic equation and its various offshoots. Why are you all talking? Because you're not. 2nd grade. Kid was sent out of the room. This is in regards to the rule, don't talk when the teacher's talking.
N.
Student A says to student B, "Dude, shut the frick up." Staff says, "Student A, we don't talk that way. In the future find a more appropriate way of expressing yourself." Student A says to staff, "Oh, sorry," then turns to student B and says, "Dude, would you please shut the frick up?"
N.
Not a teacher, but witnessed a student. We had a substitute who was leafing through the yearbook and got to the senior superlatives. Our school mascot was the Eagles. She started reading some, if then aloud, and said, "Oh, that's nice. Sarah, most school spirited." A student answered back, "Yeah, because she's always spread eagle." The substitute couldn't keep from laughing, as much as she tried not to. Let me point out that I'm female, since people will assume I'm a guy. I taught in an inner city school. We were talking about prime numbers, so I would have kids give me a number and we'd work out if the number was a prime number on the board. One kid wasn't paying attention, so me being a young teacher, I thought it'd catch him off guard and call on him. It went something along the lines of, "Mark, do you have a number? I need your number." She eat, play it cool, girl. We can talk after class. The whole room lost their shit, and I turned red from embarrassment. They then laughed at how red I got. In a high school physics class, we were learning about friction and what there is, how strong it is. So, the teacher asks, "So as an engineer, what would be some of the hard parts of designing, say, racing tires?" Some kid in the back says, "Getting out of bed in the morning." Edit. Thanks for the gold. It's reassuring to know that the plight of the engineer isn't unique. Spanish class in high school. Two guys who grew up in Spanish-speaking families were goofing off at the back of class. One guy says that he could stand the weight of another person standing on his stomach, and the other guy, who was probably just shy of 200 pounds, doesn't believe him. So the first guy gets on the ground in the back of class, and the other guy gets up and stands on his stomach. The teacher sees this and immediately yelled at the guy on the ground to get back into his seat. Without missing a beat, he says, "I can't. He's standing on me." The other guy doesn't move because he wasn't yelled at. Meanwhile, the teacher continues to be upset that the guy on the ground isn't listening to her. I witnessed a rather sad one. In my chemistry class sophomore year, one of my friends was going through some family issues, and his dad just left for a year or so. The kid was acting up in class and the teacher was like, "Do you want me to call your dad?" And he was like, "If he picks up, tell him to come home soon."
N.
A kid in my math class would sleep on his desk. One day the teacher called on him to answer a problem on the chalkboard. He woke up, solved the problem on the board with zero difficulty, and then just went back to sleep. The teacher repeated the same thing a few times with similar results, and then just let him sleep the rest of the year. I'm not a teacher, but this happened in one of my classes a few weeks back. My math teacher is a pretty chill guy, and likes to share personal info every now and then. So he decides to tell the class he is getting married this summer break. Most of the class congratulates him, and wishes him well. This one girl from the front of the class shouts out, "It has been legal for a year now. Why did you wait this long?" The whole class starts freaking dying laughing, and the teacher is just sitting there with his mouth op-edit, spelling. My friend, Brian, was in his homeroom class back in high school. The topic of abortion came up as everyone was asking each other if/why they're either against or pro-abortion. We're in Texas, so you can assume the ideas and opinions of the majority of the class. So my friend is a very intelligent and quiet fellow, minding his own business in a corner of the room. The class turns to him to get his opinion on the matter. "Someone, Brian, you've been quiet over there. So what about you? Are you pro-abortion?" Brian: "Well, I wouldn't say I'm pro, but I'm pretty good with a coat hanger." Jaws drop. The room is silent as everyone is registering what just happened. Glad I made it to school that day. I have a smart ass response from a teacher story to share. In 8th grade science class, we were learning about the planets, and the usual class clown, let's call him K, was making the usual immature jokes about Uranus. Our teacher, Mr. P, who was a younger pretty chill guy, wasn't having it, so Mr. P tells K to go outside. When K asks which door he should use to leave, Mr. P first says it doesn't matter, but quickly comes back with an answer and says, "You know what, why don't you go out the back door, since you like Uranus so much?" The whole class went crazy. Definitely one of the best teacher responses to dumb student comments that I've witnessed. This is sort of a flip from the question, but there was this awesome history teacher I had freshman year of high school who was just always in an amazing mood. We'll call him Mr. Smith. One day everyone is sitting in class waiting for the tardy bell to ring when a kid sneaks a condom onto the door handle. The bell rings and Mr. Smith walks into the room, grabs the handle to close the door, and pulls the condom off of it. Looks at the condom helmet for a split second, and stuffs it into his pocket while saying, "Thanks, I'll need this later." N. I got another flip of the script. One day in chemistry class, this kid that sat a couple rows behind me was drawing things on an orange. Just random doodle shoot. A face on one side, that S every kid drew on another. But on one spot he drew a penis, as one would do, and the teacher saw it. Instead of making him put it away or cover it up, he asked, "Why are you drawing a penis on your food? Do you like to eat penises?" No kid has ever turned that red. My buddies and I used to like to play ultimate frisbee on the football field during lunch. We were told not to. Organized sports were supposed to be that. Organized. They didn't want kids getting hurt without supervision. Anyway, one day we said screw it and decided to do it anyway, so they turned the sprinklers on us. Didn't stop us, we kept playing, and finally they sent a security guard out to get us. Detention for the rest of the day in the cold cafeteria. Soaked and cold, so we started chattering and talking, but it's hard to stay quiet when you're shivering. Anyway, the coach watching over detention told everyone to shut up. Y'all sound like a bunch of canaries in a cage. Everyone got silent. Then one person started it, and it slowly grew. Cheep 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 moo bahaha yeehaw. Yeehaw. The coach couldn't help but start laughing. Then turned the air even colder. Bastard. I've taught preschool for years, and one of my favorite dad responses to children who are being whiny just to whine is the "Hi, I'm your teacher. Egg, I'm thirsty. Hi, thirsty. I'm your teacher." Anyway, one day, after a long week, I sat down to lunch with my class preschool, remember? 4 to 5 year olds, and say to a child, "Well, call him Tommy. Boy, Tommy. I'm really tired today." Without skipping a beat, he swallows his mac and cheese, looks me right in the eyes and says, "Hi, really tired. I'm Tommy." That was the day I knew I had taught him all I could. Not a teacher, but this happened in an upper level French class, where you can only speak French. If you speak English, the teacher scolds you in French. My friend walked in a few minutes late for a quiz and wasn't allowed to take it. My friend looked at the teacher and said in English, "That's bullshit." The teacher looked back angrily and said also in English, "What did you just say, my friend?" En français, monsieur. He got kicked out of the class. In middle school, in history class, this happened. Girl: "Hey mister. C. How do you spell word idr mister?" C. D-I-C-T-I-O-N-A-R-Y. She writes it down, stares at it for a moment trying to comprehend why it doesn't look right, gets pissed at teacher, class is dying, teacher laughing as well. Not me, but a colleague told me this story. It was one of his first years teaching, so he was about 22 to 24 at the time. It was a junior high science class, and he told a student to stop messing around and get back to work. The student's response: "Man, I got beaches older than you." My sister, who is a teacher, was taking her kindergarten class through the lunch line. Well, this day was St. Patrick Day, so there was green cupcakes. My sister told the class jokingly, "Don't eat too many cupcakes or you'll turn grey." A young black boy looks up at her and says, "Miss Carrie, I ain't never seen a green brother before." Teacher said, "Now, where is Macaw?" Friend blurted out, "Infield." In men's choir in college, we were singing The Little Drummer Boy. The director stopped our singing and explained something to us. He got distracted and went off on a tangent for about 5 to 7 minutes. Then he pulled himself back around, but couldn't remember where he had stopped. He asked himself out loud, "Now where were we?" Someone in the basses said, "I think we were on Pum." The whole choir just lost it. Not a teacher. My English teacher in high school was going on about how she thought that learning another language was good for creativity and thinking outside the box. She asked the class what language they thought was best. You got the standard French, Italian, etc. Finally the smartest just blurts out Newspeak would be double plus good. Teacher absolutely lost it. I was showing Cosmos in a break between classes, and one kid seemed particularly enthralled by the tardigrade, so his Wissy's friend goes, "Small minds are amused by small things." The kid retorted, "Why do you think I hang out with you?" The whole class went bananas, and even I went over and high-fived that kid. It was a great class. The victim was laughing as hard as anyone. I miss those kids. This isn't going to be as good as when spoken out loud, but I had a friend who got into an argument with their teacher about the whole I before E, except after C thing. And if it sounds like an A at CI, my friend told his teacher that wasn't always true. So she got defensive and started going off about her lit degree and how she knows more than him. His response was, "No, seriously, there are some weird words where that rule doesn't apply." She kept saying that it wasn't true, and he kept saying the same thing over and over. "There are some weird words where that doesn't apply." He did this like 5 times, and finally she snapped and yelled, "Like what? He just yells weird." She permanently kicked him out of her class for being a smartass. English teacher here. I told a rowdy student to pipe down and work on her social studies test. It was a study hall. She said she would if I allowed her one meaningless act of rebellion. I asked her what, and she immediately burst out laughing and said, "Can I put tape on your arm?" So she put a single piece of scotch tape on my arm and then happily worked on her test for the next 40 minutes. Kids will never stop mystifying me. I once promised a kid that I would arm wrestle him if he finished whatever it was he was working on. He happily worked on it for half an hour, then came to claim his prize. Sometimes the littlest things work. PC1. He was 11. Edit. In my defense, he was a massive Samoan kid and I'm a short white girl. We had a teacher that would always threaten to phone our home if we were misbehaving, which she promptly stopped after. Teacher, what would your mother say if I called home right now? Student, she would say hello.
N.
Not a teacher, but in class, when I was younger, a kid was causing trouble and the teacher got after him. The kid was complaining about the desks and the teacher asked, "Should we just get rid of them all and sit in here Indian style?" The kid responded, "You mean with a 6-pack on the curb?" He got kicked out. Oldest meanest English teacher at my school was going over adjectives and modifiers all day. Super boring. Reject student gets up to use bathroom and is told to get a hall pass. He then says something like, "I hate these damn hall passes." Teacher is pissed and respond angrily with, "What did you say?" And the kid responds with, "Damn hall passes." Damn modifies hall passes. Mic drop and has gone. This is one of my favorite stories from high school. I'm not a teacher, but this is a story about my teacher's response to one particular smart-ass answer. So my high school mythology teacher, Mr. D, would have his honors class students help him grade tests from the other classes. He would always require properly spelled write-in answers. No multiple choice for him. So we'd get the tests, he'd read off the answers, and we'd mark them accordingly. One of his questions was, who was the wife of King Minos? Now according to our Greek law, Pasiphae, Minos' wife, was the one who had sex with a bull and gave birth to the Minotaur. So Mr. D tells us that the answer is Pasiphae, and one of the students kinda timidly raises his hand. Mr. D goes, "Watcha got, They wrote bull slut." The class breaks into laughter. Mr. D grins and thinks about it a second. "I like it. Half credit. That's why he was everyone's favorite teacher. Good sense of humor, and the fact that the answerer knew that Minos' wife was the one who birthed the Minotaur meant that at least some of the mental connections were there, so they got credit. Great guy."